Okay, so just to say that I've been working at U.S. Centers for Disease Control since 2016, and part of our team's job is to deploy, or as our UN colleagues call it, duty travel, to help support ministries of health and immunization stakeholders around the world. But we also deploy domestically, meaning states and jurisdictions can ask for CDC support for technical assistance. And so what I wanted to do is to give you some tips and tricks about getting deployed and getting useful. If you have never been deployed before, or you've never consulted in another country setting, these are all useful approaches. And they're also useful if you work in country and you are supporting an in-country response, recognizing that often we are dropped into new situations, new contexts, new stakeholders, new partners, and new challenges to try and address. And how do you do that quickly and effectively? And a lot of that is also the same advice I give to our stoppers. So I know several of you in the room are stop deployers who spent a lot of time focusing on immunization and polio eradication in many parts of the world. And this is the kind of advice that we give to all of our stoppers as well. So just to say at the very top, when you deploy, it's a challenge usually that you address in country. You're expected to bring the following: your brains, your formal education, your workplace experience, your judgment and reason, your emotional intelligence, really critical, and your cultural competence. However, you also got to bring your passport and paperwork if you're coming from another country. You have to bring your equipment, and you have to bring your humility and your listening skills. I'll give you a piece of advice that the head of our STOP team gives to each and every single deployer, which is you are given 2 eyes and 2 ears and 1 mouth, which means that you need to listen and look and watch twice as much as you speak. And that is going to be an invaluable component to being successful in the field. Now, being a deployer has a lot of unique challenges, and you might encounter some of these when you are in the simulation in Kronos. You might be asked to deploy virtually, and this is in real life as well. You might be the new kid on the block, which means that you might have to educate others on what you're doing. Who are you and what are you doing here? And how exactly are you going to help make my life easier in my job? There isn't always a counterpart to you in office or government. So you sometimes need to build bridges and relationships with people in organizations and institutions that might not have existed before. So you have to make friends quickly. You also might face cultural, political, and structural challenges when working with all of the partners, whether it's Ministry of Health, with WHO, UNICEF, US CDC, other immunization stakeholders. And that's just the name of the game. Every single context is different and is important. And if you want to be effective, you really need to understand the players and find ways of working together effectively with people who might have very different objectives from you. So now in the time of COVID-19, how has that shifted our thinking about how to offer technical assistance in countries? So for those of you, the very few of you who've not been involved in the COVID-19 emergency response, because most of you have, this is what emergency response can sound and feel like. A lot of noise. It's difficult to sift out important information. You have competing priorities. Your boss wants something which is different from maybe your team lead back at home, which might be different from what the immediate need is. You have differing lines of communication. Who are you supposed to talk to about what? Unclear lines of authority. Who are you reporting to? That can also get quite challenging to figure out. Everything is urgent and important, and so it can be very difficult to weed out, well, what do you need to prioritize today? Inevitably, there's not enough staff or time to accomplish your objectives. There's frequent staff turnover, and you have data of uncertain provenance. This is the context that we're all working in. And I would just like to see use the hand function. Raise your hand if you have had an experience with one or several of these types of issues in response. I see at least 4 participants raising their hands, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yes, it's a lot. This is the state of working in emergency response, and it's particularly challenging in the time of COVID because it's not a 2-week emergency response, it's going on for years. And so just to recognize that we've learned a lot in the time of COVID-19, and with that, I want to actually share with you what are some of the tips for successful deployment, wherever that might be. Number 1, make yourself useful and quickly. Everyone is taking time out of their day to help you get up to speed. Return the favor and roll up your sleeves. So I once had a boss tell me something really, really helpful. You are a burden until you are not. Everyone is taking time out of their day to get you up to speed to help you do your job. And so you can return the favor by getting up to speed as quickly as possible so you can start offering value as soon as possible. That means holding early discussions with your team to understand your role and expectations of you, prepare accordingly and be proactive. And then really be proactive in sharing clear goals and objectives, and then deliver quick wins. Now, I want to point out that this does not mean you should come into a room saying, I have the solution to your problems. I know exactly what's going on here. Let me give you some of my wisdom. That is not the approach that you want to be using. And I would like to hear later on in the Slido component of this session, what your ideas are for making sure that you're coming to the table with the right attitude, with the right humility, with the right perspective and the right questions, so you can better understand how you can be helpful in a context where people are overwhelmed and very, very tired. Second, if you offer critical feedback to a problem, be prepared to fix it. There's nothing more aggravating than having someone point out to you all the flaws or problems and what you know is to be a big problem, and then offering no solutions on how to address it. So telling someone they have a problem doesn't actually solve the problem. You just added another problem to their plate. So what can you do about it? You can come with several solutions, and you can then ultimately really focus on better understanding what solutions you can be specifically involved with. So for example, you can offer solutions that are expensive and very time consuming, but does that actually address the immediate acute problem that your colleagues are facing right now? Probably not. So come with several solutions of small, medium, large. And then when you offer options about potential ways of solving a problem and brainstorm on top of that, that's how you can reach a shared activity or agenda or strategy that is going to be more effective. Number three, very important, question the assumptions that you're making about the populations that you're serving. And it's not just your own assumptions, but also help the health department or whoever you're working with in ministry question their assumptions about the populations they're serving. This is a really critical component. You need to lead with empathy, ask questions if you do not understand, and ask for gut checks from trusted colleagues. This is especially important if you're trying to understand a community or population that you yourself are not from. And you want to get cultural context or political context. Talk to people who are actually from that community and just get those gut checks for, hey, does this make sense? Or is there something I'm missing here? You also really want to have this recognition that a single data point is an anecdote and completely useless for public health programming that is evidence-based. You want to collect and analyze and act on high quality data when possible. It is not always possible, but do the best you can, because the more data you have and the more decisions that you make based on data, the more likely you are to be successful. And then finally, be conservative in your language and observations and recommendations. And the way you can do that is always have a limitation section in any report or presentation. You don't want to be in a position where you're proposing a solution that's going to change everything and solve all the problems, when in fact you're doing this based on a limited amount of evidence or data or anecdote. And so you just want to be very thoughtful about how you're proposing solutions that doesn't go beyond what the data are telling you. Now, number four, give everyone the benefit of the doubt. I'm gonna do another hand raising. Who here is very tired and burned out? Anyone continuing to work in the response and just feeling continued overwhelmed and just struggle busting a little bit? Yeah, I am there too. A lot of us working public health response are. And so just to say, we hear you, we feel you. It's part of the reason why we made this training the way we designed it. But recognize that it's not just you, it's everyone around you. The pandemic really is rough on everyone, and extreme emotional reactions, burnout, inability to set work-life balance, and miscommunication are common. So just give everyone the benefit of the doubt that what you're feeling is probably what a lot of people around you are feeling too. Now, what can you do about it? If you establish a common purpose and demonstrate how you can and will help your colleagues, it will go a long way to help address some of those stressors. And you need to tell your manager when you need help. That's also really critical. Throwing in people with a lot of expertise into the field and then having them work at 200% is not sustainable. And it is a recipe for burnout. So you need to tell your manager if you need help. That's completely normal and acceptable and understandable. Now, number five, be concrete and realistic in what demand strategies to pursue. The vaccine demand strategies you develop are a reflection of how well or how little you understand programmatic needs. Your manager can help you figure out what those needs are or the priorities are. You need to document what you're doing, make sure that you develop those standard SOPs, those standard operating procedures, and give program staff the insights they need to do their jobs better and more easily. Document what you're doing. If you're beamed up by aliens tomorrow, how are you going to make sure that all of the good work that you've done and the innovation and the strategy that you've done and the data that you've worked with, how are you going to make sure that that actually lands on the right desk with the right person who can use it? It's really critical that you document what you're doing, especially when there's high turnover in emergency response. And then be creative in problem solving, because there will never be enough time, funds, or humans to do the work needed. Your job is to help people prioritize. Where can you do the most good? Where can you get the most bang for the buck? And those are some of the ways you can help.